Hey everybody, happy day after Labor Day. Yes, we're talking gaming again, and why the definition of AAA game has become useless. And this video is inspired by some interviews I've been reading with either former AAA game devs or so-called indie devs. And I'll say so-called because, again, this is about the problem with the separation between the definitions. And it's all about how AAA doesn't innovate anymore and indie is the hope of gaming. And I'm in the late stages of Death Stranding 2 right now, which is a self-described AAA game. And if you're telling me that that game does not innovate, we don't have the same definition of innovate. I'll do a Death Stranding specific video, Death Stranding 2 specific video. Obviously, the first game was innovative in that it brought porter games to the West, but Death Stranding 2 innovates in upping these asymmetric social mechanics and getting you to feel exactly what it wants to feel like every second, which is still amazing to me, but also rewarding helpfulness and, just based on feels. I have like almost 1.8 million likes in that game. What does that mean? Really nothing. It's just kind of a cred thing, but damn it doesn't feel good, right? And if this is not innovation, I don't know what is, but I've seen a lot of people just say AAA gaming is stagnant, indie is the way to go, but there's sort of this Schrodinger's definition with, these studios like Kojima Productions that don't actually fit the generally accepted, AAA game dev definition. I'll get into that, but they self-describe as AAA. And my thought is, well, yes, I agree this is a AAA game, but if this studio is a AAA game studio, then a lot of other studios that classify themselves as indie are also AAA game studios. And that's what I want to get into. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks to those who have been helping out with the laptop funds. Last I checked, it was 53% of goal. It could have gone up by the time this airs, but I've revised it down because some people were giving directly through PayPal, which I greatly appreciate. It's humbling whenever this happens, but thank you. It is not a gaming machine. It was an open box special I got on a Labor Day sale, and oh my God, that was a whole thing. I like to go into a store and buy, but these deals don't make that possible. So, yeah. Anyway, the definition of AAA game is in itself in a state of flux. The general definition is a video game characterized by a high budget, large development team, and significant marketing efforts, often produced by major publishers and considered blockbuster titles. These games aim for high production values with advanced graphics, sound, and immersive experiences, though the specific definition can be loose and has evolved over time. Now, that was the Google AI overview. For people who wonder, I thought the AI overview was good for this one because it kind of cumes it succinctly, but it's that often produced by major publishers and considered blockbuster titles that I noticed was interesting, because most people that say AAA is not innovative include that as a must. So because From Software titles and Larian Studios titles aren't produced by major publishers, they're not considered AAA. except according to this definition, that is not a requirement. That is something we see quite a bit, but it's not a requirement. I mean, Kojima Productions isn't owned by Sony. They have a publication deal with them. And the distribution by major publishers is moot in an era where anybody can get, on the PlayStation Store, anybody can get, well, if your game's of sufficient quality, anybody can get on, whatever they call Xbox Marketplace now. Games for Windows, Steam, you just pay $125 and go. GOG, I mean, some people claim CDPR is indie, but CDPR owns GOG. So, well, the same company. Same with Valve. Valve owns Steam. So, this is my issue with this definition that people use to lump in what, to lump in companies like FromSoft and Larian with indie. And Larian does this themselves. FromSoft doesn't say much. But Larian self-describes as indie, but it's indistinguishable from a company like Kojima Productions, other than the designation of sort of, Death Stranding 2. Well, the original Death Stranding is so tied to PlayStation, but that was sort of a Hail Mary of Kojima's like, I can't take it at Konami anymore. We're just going to call in a bunch of favors from friends and see what the fuck happens, right? I'd argue that Death Stranding 2 has more of an indie vibe than something like Elden Ring, which was, a co-production with George R.R. Martin, a collaboration with George R.R. Martin, or Baldur's Gate 3, which is based on a long-standing game series and has the Dungeons & Dragons license. Like, how can you claim something with a major license like that, owned by, what is it now, Hasbro? How do you claim that's indie? Because the definition is like whatever somebody wants it to be, to say indie's innovative and AAA isn't. Here's the problem with that. AAA is innovating. It's just not in the messy, very in-your-face way that indie does. A lot of the innovation in indie, and I love my indie games, right? Like, I'm so glad to see Satisfactory doing so well. RimWorld was my crack before Satisfactory was my crack. I'm trying to think of some other games. I really like them. I think there's a place for them. I think that the issue comes in with companies like From Software, like Larian, that really aren't indie and call them, well, From Software doesn't, but Larian does, kind of call themselves indie to get away with things like, really unpolished late game gameplay at launch, just dumping Karlach's ending because, it was part of the upper city of Baldur's Gate and we never got there, whoops. And this is when I do think that commentators like me have to start questioning these definitions and whether they are helpful. Because, I platinumed Elden Ring. Okay? So you can't say, you're just not good at it. There are a lot of things just with more quality of life features. And yes, they've added quality of life features since launch, like knowing where characters are on the map. But there's just a respect players' time principle that makes something like an Assassin's Creed game more enjoyable to play than Elden Ring. And that's not because it's easier. It's just because where the fuck is that chick with no arm now? She's moved around 4 times. I've lost her. Where's the lady that eats eyeballs? Like, just little things like that quest tracking. Well, that's not the point. Well, when you're selling this number of copies, perhaps it should be. We're allowed to talk about the reliance on wikis that a lot of people have to do. I mean, I was so hesitant when I first got into that game to go to wikis, but everybody I knew was doing it. And so I looked it up. I mean, I even put my How to Beat Melania, Melania, Blade of Mikola. Too many M's. But I even put that video up because it is sort of counterintuitive, and I found I needed I didn't respec ever in my Elden Ring playthrough. I did it like both my playthroughs. It's like, we are role-playing this. So with my particular build, it was sort of, here's how I did it, because it was an atypical way. And the community element is cool that way. How'd you beat this boss? That, cool. Yes, share. Needing a wiki to know where a character went, less so. And I do think that we should be able to say, like, hey, sloppiness, you know, you can't just get away with that when, by saying we're indie, again, I have no evidence that FromSoft did. We're talking about Larian in this case. You can't just dodge, critiques or feedback regarding sloppiness just by going, oh no, we're indie. We innovate. We take risks. Because let's jump over to, and to be clear, before people scream at me, yes, I understand there's a certain FromSoft design philosophy where you kind of stumble around and find shit. And Elden Ring was the first game, well, no, Bloodborne really frustrated me, where there was times that I just had no idea where I was supposed to go because certain things were just so fucking hidden. And I got so tired of playing that one, like, main square bonfire thing again and again and again. It was giving me flashbacks to the original Dark Souls that way. And, like, at that point, that's not a feature. That's a flaw. People should, when you're making the money and you're spending the money that these games spend, things like quest tracking should not be too much to ask. That doesn't cut the difficulty at all. And I recognize that is not their philosophy. And that's fine. But when these games are selling 20 million copies, maybe this is something to consider if they want to sell, 25 million copies. I wonder how many people of those 20 million actually finished the game. I know a lot of people did, but still. Hopping over to Larian and Baldur's Gate 3, who do flat out say, we are indie and we innovate. I'm trying to think of what is really innovative about that title, because kink is not an innovation. The mechanics are very much Divinity Original Sin 2 with a dice roll mechanic from the tabletop version of the game that people have been trying to do tabletop on computer for like at least a decade now. I mean, going back to, it really started with like the Neverwinter Nights thing and then went through, there were a bunch of other isometric games that attempted to do it. But edgelordness is not innovation. And the whole sandboxy, minimal difficulty, play the way you want. Games like BioShock did that back in the day. And I mean, Skyrim certainly did that. Being super big is not really innovative either, because Skyrim and Grand Theft Auto. And so, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know where the innovation is. A lot via hot mess is not innovative. And that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Games that refine certain things are some of the, some of the greatest games out there. I mean, they just released Gears of War 1 again. And that was, yeah, they had the context sensitive stuff, But that was in other games. It was added to a shooter. And the fact that it was third person instead of first person, again, not the first time it's done, but the fact that they were doing third person shooter in a first person shooter world, the combination was cool. And innovative being the only thing that makes a game good is part of this sticking point. And part of the problem with the discussion of games is that people have the things they like and they want, instead of just going, I really like this, they have to say, well, it's better than all the rest. And that requires a certain amount of fact-based evidence. And the market's big enough that there is space for a lot of stuff. And my concern is not only is AAA gaming not getting its due on innovation because of the specter of analytics, but the issues with indie are getting papered over by the innovation moniker. And that's a problem too, because innovation should not come at the expense of how you treat your workers, right? And there's a lot of issues with, these sort of borderline studios that way. They don't have the robust HR departments that some of the AAA game studios have. And because they're indie, people talk behind the scenes, but they don't talk in public, right? Because the go-to leakers, Jason Schreier, won't publish the hot goss there because of philosophical pretensions. But getting back to AAA and innovation, like I said, I play AAA games. I remember going back to the Assassin's Creed franchise after Valhalla. I'm just like, oh my God, this is so bloated. I'm so bored. And I didn't dig the Viking deal. Certain parts of it I liked, certain parts of it I didn't like. Certain Assassin's Creed games I just bounce off. And it's nothing to do with the game. I didn't click with Assassin's Creed Origins the way I clicked with Odyssey. I'm not sure. So it's not, oh no, it was a white protagonist. No, I mean, Greeks. But it just, for some odd reason, and I mean, there were parts of Origins I really, really liked. Exploring around, like, the river and all the birds and the alligators, or crocodiles, yeah. That was really cool. The game just felt kind of thin for me, but that was because that was the leap into more of an RPG vibe. And Assassin's Creed does innovate. I mean, remember when they totally broke their vertical exploration system to make it more parkour? That was Unity. Yeah, and that was kind of a disaster. I mean, the crowd mechanic innovations in Unity were something else. And the way they released Rogue, really underrated Assassin's Creed game. If you haven't played Rogue and you liked Black Flag, please play it. I was one of the few people that reviewed it back then because everybody was on Unity because it was a next-gen game, right? The Watch Dogs franchise was an experiment. But jumping to Mirage, there were these very neat cinematic innovations that were subtle, but it was obvious. The way Assassin's Creed and Far Cry both play so effortlessly is innovative, because though they're not smacking you in the face with the improved feature, they don't get credit for it. And that's not fair. People like me who talk about this stuff and are supposed to know a thing or two, it's our responsibility to go, no. These are refinements. These are innovations. What they did there is hard. Just getting the visual feedback out of the way and making it pleasing is that is not easy, and they're constantly refining and improving and innovating on that measure. If you want an example of a game that was a massive step back, Cyberpunk 2077 at launch, I actually stopped while I was streaming and went, here's what's fucking wrong with the menus and the equipment screens. And I got fucking hammered by CDPR fans for that. But guess what they fixed in the subsequent patches? Yeah, that exact feature. So maybe instead of being so tribal and territorial about this stuff, listen to dissenting opinions and back up your arguments. Why is it innovative? And I would really love to say that Baldur's Gate 3 is some big innovative game, so it deserved all the hype it got. But that game was just lightning in a bottle, and it was a combination of a bunch of pre-existing things and Astarion. I mean, let's face it, without Astarion, would people really care about that game nearly as much as they did? Probably not. And he's the only character that his story is not tied in to anything involving the Absolute Crisis. He's this guy who's just like, Ambush Bug or Deadpool or Psycho Pirate. He just doesn't fit, but he's the best part of anything he's in. Yes, I said Ambush Bug was the best part of anything he's in. That's a DC Comics character. I recognize that's a hot take. It was kind of a joke. But, I'm scared to say things like that, because you'll get attacked by a bunch of guys who want not just guys, but who want their kinky sex and edgelord misery porn, right? And for some odd reason, smelly bear men who sweat through their leather armor. If you've ever been to like a jousting competition or LARPs or a Ren Fair, you'll understand how disgusting that is. I mean, Gale smelled like books. That was okay. But yeah. Yeah. Anyway. And I'm not saying that makes it a bad game. Some people have a smelly leather fetish. I know that's out there, but kink isn't innovation. Again, fetish isn't innovation. It's not. Words mean things. And getting into Assassin's Creed Shadows, I mean, the sheer noise surrounding that game suggests that they did do something risky. Obviously, just setting a video game in that part of the world and using, and the big difference between Ghost of Tsushima, that was, one would argue, less risky, and Assassin's Creed is, the idea of, first of all, the locations in Assassin's Creed were much more well known. I loved Ghost of Tsushima, okay? I loved it. It was a great game. Loved it. But you didn't climb the environments the same way. And that seemed to be one of the things that made people go bug fuck over it. When you're climbing all over Notre Dame Cathedral, nobody feels the need to go, oh, I hope people don't do this in real life. I blink, fainting couch, right? Where obviously certain things in Japan, that was a risky move, right? The attempts to fictionalize a point in history in a part of the world that unfortunately gets very fetishized in the West. And trying to use the same nuance that the Assassin's Creed franchise brought to other parts of history, I do think that was gutsy. I think it was risky. And the sheer screaming about whether Yasuke was a samurai or not, or if you play the game, it doesn't violate any part of history at all. Also, the people who say he wasn't really and the people who said he was are both right, because, spoiler, he's a samurai for about 5 minutes. Because they deal with the fact that, yeah, your title, especially if you were an outsider, does does depend on the Lord who gave you that title surviving. The minute he's gone, well, no title anymore, foreigner. And that was one of those games, much like Black Flag, where, Edward Kenway was not local to the Caribbean. The Assassin's Creed franchise goes back and forth of whether somebody's local to the area, like Altair, Ezio, well, he bounced around Europe a bit, but you know what I mean, or Cassandra, or somebody like Edward, or Yasuke, who isn't. And, is Jacob and Evie in Syndicate? Obviously, they were local. But, the dual protagonist structure and how that worked, the fact that game really did play more like a simulator, in that you were jumping around looking for stuff, and it was more of a character study than an action plot-driven game. Not everybody's gonna like it, and that's the thing about innovation. Some people found it empty. I found it really neat because it's that old Assassin's Creed vibe of let's try to minimize ludonarrative dissonance, even though I'm not super sure that's a thing. It's a philosophy of, well, you shouldn't want to push the red button and not be able to do it. So in this, it's just, you're basically researching this part of history through video games powered by the DNA of people who were alive at the time. It is very sci-fi stretchy, but you know what I mean? That whole, you can just hop around and participate in their life in no particular order because you are playing this, you are not them. And I found the immersive mode really quite cool, where you could play in, the actual languages they were speaking. I found the idea that you could play it as an RPG, but also play it as a straight up action game where the game made the choices for you so you could find out what the canon story actually was. I found that cool. Now, I did play immersive mode. I played the RPG version. And one of the things I found is that Yasuke and Nae were so clearly defined characters that when it came to potential romances or hookups, I had these moments where it's like, well, me as a player, I would like to see what happens here, but I have too much respect for this character. He wouldn't do that. I just couldn't bring myself to think Yasuke was into guys. And so I didn't pursue those romance options. I hate the term romance options, but that's a video for another time, because they're usually just banging and you don't even see anything. But it's that made me roleplay. That made me think of him as a person. And I think that when you consider the themes of that particular Assassin's Creed, where the reason he was so loyal to Nobu Obunaga is because he was one of the few people who treated him like he was worth anything, that's a win. That's got that same kind of innovative vibe that Death Stranding 2 does. And the fact that even game companies who know this stuff are saying, AAA doesn't innovate, it's just not true. I mean, going back to Ghost of Tsushima, that wind as, navigation assist, that was cool. A lot of the haptic feedback in AAA games is freaking amazing and innovative. If we keep perpetuating these beliefs that are not backed up by evidence, because a claim like AAA games don't innovate, the minute I present evidence of innovation that took place in the AAA space, that argument is now invalid. It's disproven. Because could AAA innovate more? Maybe. I do not find that the industry truly rewards innovation. When I was reviewing games regularly, I saw a lot of games do something first Like Heavenly Sword was a shining example, and it got shit on because it wasn't a cool thing yet. But that game was influential. I mean, that was one of the first like high-end mocap games. Andy Serkis directed that game. But it was short. Meanwhile, the single-player campaigns on shooters at the time were shorter than Heavenly Sword was. But it was just an okay game to shit on. It was a PlayStation 3 title. And, they were looking for something to hate because game reviewers want to be cool kids. That was my mistake. I was never about that. I wanted to go, all right, if there's something cool, I want to point it out. I took so much shit for not following the crowd, let me tell you. But again, we're the ones that are supposed to know this stuff. We're supposed to point it out to people like you lovely folks watching this video that may not know. And especially the subtle stuff, like how many people notice it in Dead Space? They put, the health gauges and things like that on the guy's outfit so that it didn't have to be this bar at the side or top of the screen anymore, right? Like that's freaking cool. And, cinematic has morphed in meanings, These are things that the people who know should be giving fellow people in their industry their flowers. And the problem with, some of these former BioWare guys too mouthing off about AAA, a lot of them are part of the people that, part of the team that made Anthem. So like, maybe insisting that AAA needs to stand up to these devs. Maybe you're not the ones to talk, former Anthem devs. And I mean, maybe jumping from, my understanding is there wasn't much of a choice. They were told to jump from what became Veilguard to Anthem, but you could have quit, and all AAA game companies are not equal. You notice the ones I mentioned most was Ubisoft, but again, Dead Space was published by EA. The Star Wars games, the Fallen Order and the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, yeah, they were Soulsborns with a Star Wars coat of paint, like a Soulsborns light with a Star Wars coat of paint. But they were fun. And, they refined certain elements of the Soulsborne format. So do they have to be innovative? What I would give that game, I wouldn't say it's innovative. They knew how to create a likable Star Wars cast that had nothing to do with the Skywalkers and people liked and got attached to. That's enough. Shit. Activision was the driving force behind Skylanders, which made the Toys to Life thing this blah for a really long time. AAA innovates. This falsehood. The AAA doesn't innovate gives cover for AAA companies to not innovate because they say, well, we're not rewarded for this, so do what the spreadsheet said. And the actual devs in these companies have to fight too hard for innovation. But they do fight, and they do get those innovations through. And you notice Ubisoft and Sony are well above their weight class, but I managed to work in kind of all the majors to show that it can happen anywhere. Maybe by fluke, maybe they squeak it in because they checked every box on the AAA thing otherwise. But having a large core kind of what we used to call casuals playing only 2 or 3 games a year, and one of those is Madden and the other is Call of Duty, that still brings money into the industry. And you never know, like once they have that console in their house, maybe they will sample other stuff, and then you get into these multiplayer games. Is League of Legends AAA or not? Well, I mean, they got a TV spinoff. How indie is that? I don't really know. To me, I think that we need to start talking about budgets, specifically budgets. I think that the thing that matters is you can't judge a game that was made. And the interesting thing is, no one really knows what these games cost. It's all rumored. Baldur's Gate 3 apparently cost $100 million to make, whereas some of the others, estimated to be around 100 million, but Larian hasn't officially disclosed the exact figure. Death Stranding 2, somewhere in the range of 150 to 300 million. I think 300 is a bit high. Cyberpunk 2077 was, the original budget was 316 million, but it ballooned to possibly 450 million. So, I mean, that blows most AAA games out of the water. Elden Ring was solidly in AAA budget territory, 150 to 200 million. I think any game over $100 million, now that with a $100 million budget, that's a AAA game. When you're using known voice actors, that's a AAA game. And I do think that because games like that make stars out of guys like Neil Newbin and, Jennifer English, even though I don't like Shadowheart, that's important to the industry, because then they can go, Jennifer English can go and do a game like Clair Obscur and her fans will follow her. And so everybody wins. So stop freaking bashing AAA. I do think that the three requirements are, we need to set what is considered a high budget. Because to me, $100 million and up is a high budget. What does a large team mean? Clair Obscur had to come out and stomp Sandfall, had to say, no, it wasn't made by 30 people. The core team was 30 people. But the freelancers, the contractors were much larger. Stop saying that. And, the major publisher thing is moot now. Anybody can get their game on PlayStation. And what does it matter if a major publisher, if it's significant marketing efforts? That's what a major publisher used to provide. So high budget, large development team, and significant marketing efforts. Okay, we have to define what high, large, and significant mean. And that is the issue, right? It's sort of like on the line. I would say personally, but I'm not willing to die on this hill, 100 million, a team of at least, with contractors, 150 people. But depends. If you got a core team of 50, that's pretty big too. The large team is the part that gets a little iffy. I'd want to err on the side of being forgiving on that one, because we don't want people crunched. Just say, oh, we're indie. We have 29 people. We got under your 30-person threshold, right? And then significant marketing efforts. What does that mean? Because Baldur's Gate 3 was bloody everywhere. Does doing a dance at the Game Awards like Alan Wake 2 did? Another game that AAA production values, very innovative. Right there, I can't believe I didn't think of it. But is doing a dance at the Game Awards, is that significant marketing efforts? Because you have to pay for the choreography. This is why this is crap. This is why these definitions are causing more problems than they help. Because, first of all, the innovation gap is false, as I proved. There's a lot of abuses of staff and a real lack of job security in the indie space that I appreciate companies like Sandfall, really trying to care that, 15 people from Ubisoft left and went with them. And cool for them for taking a chance off, a musician on SoundCloud. That guy was amazing, his soundtrack. But innovation doesn't justify abusing your staff or crunching your staff. And innovation can come from anywhere. It can come from indie. It can come from AAA. And I do think that this indie good, AAA bad thing, it's covering up a lot of abuses. And it's just not true that AAA doesn't innovate. And truth matters. Our Are we going to get unique stories out of AAA? Well, again, Death Stranding. But we're probably going to get more personal experiences in indie, and that's enough. You know, we're probably going to get more weird, out there, experimental. Experimental is a better word than innovative, quite frankly. Experimental, yes, there's a lot more experimental stuff in the indie space. Yeah. But, yeah, we're going to get more experimental stuff. But there's nothing wrong with both. You can play Clair Obscur, and then you can play Assassin's Creed Shadows. The best industry has both. So I'd like devs, especially heads of studios that are indie by the skin of their teeth based on a technicality of not being published by a major company, which isn't even part of the authoritative definition, to, you know, stop acting like an edgelord from one of your games, Larry, and like be a little bit more gracious. You sold a lot of copies. You made a lot of money. You have fully animated, fully voiced cutscenes. You are AAA in a lot of people's minds. Even Elden Ring isn't a fully voiced bloody game. So don't do this. Seriously. Be cool. Recognize that people working for a AAA game studio, because, hey, they got kids to feed and need the job security, and not even that anymore, my God. But have a little respect that they work hard too. And AAA innovates differently than indie does. They focus on quality of life features and smoother, you know, refining of things. But that's no less innovative than something more experimental. Let's all just be cool and let people have fun. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching this gaming video. See you tomorrow.